for this cloud. So today we have a very special guest who is also an esteemed member and a past president of our club, and I want to do the honor of introducing him. As you may know, Wes, our very own Wes Wesley Fong, is an attorney and adjunct professor teaching law at the University of Hawaii, Shiler School of Business. He was the staff counsel for Fireman's Fund Insurance Company and a former state supervising deputy attorney general in charge of the tort litigation division and a city senior deputy corporation counsel in charge of trials division. He is a graduate of the University of Illinois School of Law, University of Hawaii, and Puno School. He's also a graduate of the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College and U.S. Army War College. Wes is a Vietnam veteran, which is what he's going to be talking about today, and a retired colonel in the U.S. Army. His last duty assignment included the Staff Judge Advocate, the IMA, U.S. Army/Japan Deputy Commander, Pacific Army Liaison Command, and the Staff Judge Advocate Headquarters 9 Corps or IX Corps August or AUG. His awards include the Legion of Merit, 2 Bronze Stars, 2 meritorious service medals, the Vietnamese Cross of Gallantry with Bronze Star awarded by the Republic of Vietnam and Combat Medic Badge. He has been president of or chair of many organizations, which include Chinese Chamber of Commerce, Military Officers Association of America, Hawaii Loa Chapter, Hawaii Arthritis Foundation, Palolo Chinese Home, and Marino School Advisory Board. He's also served as vice chair of Hawaii and Pacific Exports Council, U.S. Department of Commerce, and was the director of the Catholic Charities Hawaii. He has served as a commissioner or the vice chair of the Hawaii Liquor Commission, and is presently a commissioner and a vice chair of the State Ethics Commission. He's also the chair of his neighborhood board. Highly involved, right? Among his honors, he is the recipient of the National Jefferson Award for Public Service, Distinguished University of Hawaii Alumni Award, and the 50th Vietnam Commemorative Award. And it's only awarded to those 50 Vietnam veterans in Hawaii for this military and community service. He's also going to be talking about his soon-to-be published book, Memoirs of a Chinese American Officer. Somebody I absolutely look up to, ever since being part of Rotary, and somebody I aspire to be like more so in the future. So can we get a big, nice round of applause for our very own Wesley Fong?
I think we ran out of time for Wes because of that intro. So, great intro, though.
Hey, Matt, thanks a lot for the introduction. I didn't expect you to be reading it because I know it was posted in your note. But thank you very much. Maybe I should quit while I'm ahead, huh, Matt, after my introduction. And the reason I'm here is because Naomi gave me a buzz 2 days ago. It was 3 days ago, and said, our guest speaker can't make it. So can you get somebody in a short notice to speak? And I says, no, I'm not going to ask anybody short notice. So he said, well, how about me speaking? I said, well, what do you want me to speak about? So whatever, we talked about Shinseki. I says, well, I don't have 4 stars, I'll tell you now. So I said, well, why don't I just share some of my excerpts from my book that I soon to be published. It's called Memoirs of a Chinese American Officer, and also the Vietnam War. Now, someone asked, why are you, publishing a book in regards to your memoirs? Well, actually, it was for my family and telling them about my 38 years being in uniform. And then after my editors finished reading my manuscript, they encouraged me to publish the book. So I'm going to take a few excerpts from the book, and I hope you will enjoy it. Actually, my 38 years of service really began in Punahou, where JROTC was mandatory for all of us. And Doug remembers this because all of us, and Stan, all of us who were there at Punahou during the early 1960s, or actually the late 1950s. And JROTC was mandatory. I still remember when I was selected or promoted to captain and became a company commander, I thought I looked pretty sharp in my starch khaki, and I had on my left side my saber, and my right side I had a real cute blonde sponsor. All she had to do was look pretty and know how to march. Well, I went on to University of Hawaii where ROTC was mandatory, and for the first 2 years. As a matter of fact, Doug and I were in the drill team together, kind of tossing out the M1 or whatever rifle it was in the air and try to catch it. The first 2 years were mandatory. The last two were optional. I decided to stay in for the last two because besides looking good in a uniform, I appreciated the discipline and also the organization of the military. Also, I could get extra money because we were paid. And I could save the money to go to law school on the mainland since we didn't have a law school here. And at the same time, I could keep in good physical shape. I had to run, and do sit-ups and push-ups. Now I had to choose between the Air Force and the Army ROTC during my last 2 years of ROTC at the university. I really wanted to be a pilot, and I wanted to fly one of those $1 million planes. Well, I went up to the Air Force ROTC recruit and says, I want to be a pilot. And he says, well, sir, can you take a look at that eye chart? Can you tell me which way the E is facing? Well, I was nearsighted. But he said, don't worry about it. You can be a navigator. I said, I don't want to be a navigator. I want to be a pilot. Forget it. So I went over to the Army ROTC line, and I told the recruiter about what I wanted to be in the Air Force. He said, don't worry, sir. So he said, stick up your index finger, okay? And he says, do this. Oh, good. You can pull a trigger. Do you have asthma? No. Good. You're hired. So there was the beginning of my life in the U.S. Army. Now, we had to go to summer camp at Fort Lewis, Washington to live the life of an enlisted, so we know what it's like to be enlisted. And actually, it was fine, except getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, running in shorts at 40 degrees weather. And then at the same time, running in our boots and sometimes with a 10-pound M1 rifle. That was pretty tough. But we learned how to keep our barracks clean, our bunks in order, and how to clean our toilets and making sure the spick and span, all of that good stuff. And then we also learned about, how to fire an M1, how to kill a person with the enemy with a knife. I mean, all this good stuff that you can use when you're a little older and in my law practice, right? Yeah. But the good thing about it is that it taught us esprit de corps. It taught us how to get along with our fellow soldiers. It taught us leadership. It taught us organization and discipline. And that prepares us for being an officer in the United States Army. Now, when I got back from Fort Lewis, Washington, I became the brigade adjutant. And I was the guy who got up in front of all the troops and said, bring your units to attention. It was really kind of impressive. I'm out there with all the troops and giving them that command. I was part of the brigade staff, command staff. After graduation, I had to decide, before graduation, I had to decide which branch of service I wanted to go into. So it was to be either a combat or non-combat, or we call a combat support. I chose Armor and Medical Service Corps, and I got Medical Service Corps. And one reason is because my mother always wanted me to be a doctor. I thought it was pretty close. So there I was in the Medical Service Corps, saving lives, not taking lives. In 1965, I graduated from the UH and I got a BA and also a second lieutenant commission. I was a little worried because in 1965, our President Johnson started to send more troops over to Vietnam. So I said to myself, I really wanted to get a law degree. So I asked the Army if I could get a deferment for 3 years to go to law school. Well, I lucked out. They let me go to law school for 3 years before going on active duty. In law school, I was promoted to first lieutenant. When I came back from law school, I clerked for actually became a deputy attorney general and passed the bar. And the Army asked if I wanted to go JAG, that's Judge Advocate General, it's for all the lawyers. And I said, well, how much longer do I have to stay in? He said, 2 more years. I said, forget it. I'll stay in for take my chances in Vietnam, because I wanted to get back to Hawaii so I can make some money as a lawyer, where all my friends who didn't go to in the military were making money. Well, my first active duty stint was in Fort Sam Houston, Texas. That was for officer basic training. They're supposed to teach us how to become a medical service corps officer. Well, I learned some very important things, like how to draw blood, how to do an emergency tracheotomy in the field with I'll show you, a pocket knife and a cheap ballpoint pen. So what you do is, if you have a head injury, rather, you can't breathe from up here. So you feel down here, okay, this is your soft spot. You take the knife and you cut across. Then what you do, you break open the pen and you stick it in there and tie it up, and then you can breathe. You didn't know that, did you? Don't do it, guys. And I also learned how to deliver babies. Now I know what crowning means. Well, all of that was fine and dandy, and I learned how to become a good medical service corps officer. But at the same time, I had to have what we call a dream sheet. And a dream sheet means that you can pick, as an officer, a young officer, where you want to be stationed. And you have 2 choices, one in the United States and one overseas. Well, I chose the beautiful Presidio at California. And I also chose Germany for overseas, because I took 5 years of German in high school and college. Well, as luck may have it, I got Fort Sam Houston and Vietnam. And when I talked to my career officer, I said, hey, I told him about my choices and what I got. And he looked at me without even blinking an eye and without a smile. He said, yeah, let's see. Presidio, Germany, and you got what? Fort Sam Houston and Vietnam? Well, that's pretty close. And I said, I should have sent him a postcard from Vietnam. Anyway, well, that's Fort Sam Houston. I got my orders for Vietnam. And the hardest part about that, because I resolved that I was going to go to Vietnam, and I was going to make it a great adventure. Okay, it's an experience of a lifetime. And the good thing about it, I was single and I was gung-ho. But the problem is, how do you tell your parents that their only child, not the only son, only child is going to war? Well, I thought about it, and I said, I'm going to choose a little humor. So I remember my mom telling me, Wes, Mom and Dad wanted to take you to Asia after your active duty. I said, okay. So I called up my mom and dad, and my mom answered the telephone, and I says, hey, Mom, I got some good news. You can save all your money. We're going to save money. Because remember, you and Dad were going to take me to Asia after my active duty. Well, don't worry about it. The Army is going to send me for free, all expense paid. And she asked, where? I said, oh, Vietnam. And there was a long silence on the other side of the phone line. I guess I should have used another approach. But again, I think they resolved that I was going to Vietnam. Now, I still don't know why they gave me a list of all of their friends from the different countries surrounding Vietnam. And my future mother-in-law told me to go shopping for bird's nest soup. I didn't think they knew I was going to war. They thought maybe I was going on a holiday or just an extended leave. But anyway, there I was going to Vietnam. I landed in Vietnam at Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base in Saigon in November of 1969. There I was in a starched khaki uniform, looking pretty spiffy, real slim with a flat top. And as I was walking to the depot to go and report, all of a sudden I heard, "Hey, Wes, you son of a bitch." I was like stunned. And I said, who's calling me? Well, it was actually one of my fraternity brothers. He had joined the 29th Infantry Brigade, Hawaii National Guard, thinking that he could duck going to Vietnam. Well, for those of you who may remember, the 29th Infantry Brigade got activated in 1968 and they all went over. And thank goodness that all my fraternity brothers that did go over came back alive. And I give them that much credit that they did go in. Now, at my first assignment was the 23rd Medical Battalion up in Chu Lai. And when I got the assignment, I looked at my map, and my map I got from the Star Bulletin. You know how they have that big map of Vietnam? And I says, Chu Lai's not on my map. Where the hell is it? Well, it was way up north near the DMZ. I said, oh, great. And before I went up to the Maricel Division, I talked to one of the sergeants who came from that division. And he says, oh, sir, the Maricel Division's having its share of wounded and killed. I said, oh, pretty heavy. And I go, oh, great. Well, anyway, I spent a short time in Chu Lai. It was kind of boring. It was as big as Schofield Barracks. And occasionally we get a couple of rockets, and that's about it. The worst thing was being there in the monsoon season, and it rained and it rained and it rained, and I could never get dry. Then I got my orders. I got my orders to go down to Duc Pho. Now, Duc Pho was down near a place called My Lai. I don't know if some of you remember the My Lai massacre. That happened in 1968. That's when some of our American troops literally killed over 500 unarmed civilians, including women and children. That was a very sad, sad story for the Army. Everybody got court-martialed, and even the division commander was relieved of command. Anyway, I got orders for Company B, 23rd Medical Battalion. I was going to be the executive officer. And they said, hey, we're going to promote you to captain. I said, oh, great. I've only been a first lieutenant for 2 years. I must have done well in Fort Sam Houston. And I asked him, what happened to the last captain? Oh, he got shot. I said, oh, great. Well, anyway, being the executive officer of a medical company, I was second in command. The commander was actually a major who was a doctor. And actually nobody wanted, well, actually the doctors didn't want to run the Army because they just wanted to practice medicine, which is fine with me. So I pretty much managed the whole company. And we got along very well, okay? He did the medicine and I did the management, if nothing else. We were about 50 miles away from Duc Pho, from Chu Lai. So we didn't fly. We had to go and drive down Highway 1, which actually connects north to south Vietnam. And we did it on a deuce and a half, which is a quarter-ton truck. And I was told that, as we're going down, you may get shot at. I said, oh, great. So I said, oh, heck with it. I put on my helmet, my flak jacket, and I cocked my M16. We had an M16 this time, and I did a low profile on the quarter ton, and we made it safely to Duc Pho. Actually, Duc Pho was pretty small compared to Chu Lai, and it had one runway for a cargo plane. But I had 110 men in my company, from medics to mechanics and clerks to cooks. And I was the only non-white and non-black in the company. I was only Asian. So I used to tell my men, look, guys, I may look like the enemy, but I'm still wearing the same uniform as you. And I'm glad that they did respect me, because actually, if they did not respect me and if they didn't like me, like many young officers, usually second lieutenant, they would shoot them in the back. Well, we call it fragging. What they would do is take a grenade, throw it under your hooch or your bed, and then you get blown up. And if you're out in the field, you may get shot in the back by your troops. Now, how do we know if you got shot in the back by your troops? If you use an M16 round, the round would enter clean, but when it exits, it comes out in a big hole, gaping hole on the front. Whereas the VC, that's a Viet Cong, would use an SKS or AK-47, and the bullet would go in clean and come out clean. So we knew if that lieutenant or officer was not liked by his troops. I remember one occasion, we talked about minority. On one occasion, I had disciplined one of my black soldiers. And lucky we didn't have any problems with black and white. I mean, some other companies, they would have shooting matches. But I had to discipline one of my black soldiers, and he said to me, "You're picking on me because I'm a minority." And I looked him straight in the eye and says, "Hey, if there's any minority, it's me. I'm the only minority in this company." So he was quiet after that. Now, my daily routine was kind of mundane. I go around the company making sure everything's squared. I talk to my men because, I wanted to make sure that my men were okay. We learned in the military that mission is first, but if you take care of your men will take care of you. And we managed the company, and our main duty, our main job was to save lives, not take lives. So what would happen is that if somebody was wounded in the field, we'd send the medevac, or we call it dust off, to go pick them up in the field, bring them to our clearing station, stabilize them, then take them on to the general hospital 50 miles away in Chulai. If we could treat them there, and they'd recuperate and go back into the field. That was our job. Often, even though it's so mundane down in the company area, my AO, I really needed, and I remember I was young and I was gung-ho. I needed more excitement. So what I did, I volunteered, and I went on some of these missions, quite a few of the missions with the medevac. And most of the missions that we went on, we had to go out into the field where the troops were taking enemy fire and pick up the wounded, both American and Vietnamese. Be there if they were even soldiers. Well, I remember that when I went on these missions, I would sit on the side of the helicopter. It's a Huey helicopter, and it's made of only aluminum. So you could press the shell of the helicopter. So what I would do is take a 25-pound flakjack, put it in the front of me to protect me from any bullets coming toward me, and I sit on the other 25 flakjack, because if they shot straight up into the helicopter, it would deflect the bullet. And at the same time, in order to protect my family jewels, what I did was I took my 45 caliber pistol with my holster and put it across my family jewels. And believe it or not, a pilot told me about that, and it did work. So I remember one mission that we went on, and it's just a matter of staying alive, if nothing else. I went out to go pick up a wounded in a firefight. Now, the difference between the NVA, which is the North Vietnamese Army, and the Viet Cong were guerrillas. The North Vietnamese Army were regular soldiers. So when they saw a dust-off, that's a medevac, with a big red cross, the NVA would stop firing, okay, so that we could pick up the wounded, regardless if it's American or Vietnamese. But the Viet Cong would stop firing. And as soon as we were hovering they'd open up. Well, anyway, on this particular occasion, which I really remember very vividly, we came down on a really rapid descent. It's, just going like this. Whoa. So we could, and they were involved in a firefight. And when you come down on a rapid descent, you get to experience what we call pucker power. Now, what pucker power is that if you come down on a rapid descent, you actually lift your oculi up and you suck the seat. That's called pucker power. And so here we are, going right down, and I heard on my headphones, enemy fire coming from the south. And guess what? The darn aircraft commander, the pilot, landed me facing the south. And all I could say was, oh, shit. Anyway, we got back to the base, and I asked him, hey, what the hell are you doing facing me to the south? That's where the fire was coming from. And he said to me, straight-faced, well, sir, we wanted to save the wounded, and captains are expendable. I didn't know whether or not to punch him out or laugh, but anyway, we did save the wounded. And that was all that really mattered at that time. Now, at times, I wanted to tell my parents about the exciting life I was, here, this is the action. This is where all the action is. I wanted to tell my parents in detail, what I was doing, so they could be excited like me. Well, I remember one time I wrote to my parents, and I didn't spare any detail. I mean, no detail. And after that, I got a 14-page letter back from my mother saying how stupid I was and don't ever do that again. Well, the next letter that I wrote was a little more mundane. I basically said, dear parents, another boring day of dead water buffalo. They used to call that roast beef, and powdered eggs. So, it was really boring, guys, So I didn't do that anymore to my parents. I mean, I worried them enough being in Vietnam. Aside from being nearly shot in regards to these missions, we also had rockets hitting our AO. Now, our AO means area of operation. We had in our company, we had a tent that had a big red cross, and you could see it from afar. The problem was that red cross, or that tent, was right next to what we call a TOC, Tactical Operations Center. So the VC would love to shoot rockets into our AO, and they wanted to take out the TOC, which is like the brains of the whole unit or the whole operation of the AO. So they would aim at the red cross, and they were lousy shots. And so a lot of the rockets would come into our AO, and thank goodness none of us got hit. I remember when we had rocket alerts, are you supposed to jump out of your bed, get into your boots, and go to the shelter? Well, after a while, I got so tired of it doing that. I rolled over and said, dear God, please don't let one of those rockets hit me. And I was lucky, none of them did. I remember, and as I said before, we were there to save lives, not take lives. I remember one occasion we had a mass casualty, and that was our job now. And what had happened is one of the platoons went in and hit a what you call a booby trap. And the booby trap was made of a 105 millimeter shell, and it exploded and killed and wounded quite a few of the men. Well, they brought him into our clearing station, and we had bodies all over the place. And one of them, the soldiers, had his face down on the stretcher. And I needed to have him, I had to ID him, okay, for the record. So I asked the first sergeant, I need to know who this guy is, because he didn't have he was missing his dog tags. So I remember the first sergeant grabbing the guy's hair, lifting his face up, and he went, ugh. He didn't have a face. On another occasion, they brought a DOA, which is a dead on arrival. No, strike that. He was dead on arrival. The next case incident I remember very vividly. They brought another soldier in on a stretcher, and he was yelling, "Oh, oh, my leg, my leg." Well, you know, I really didn't have the heart to tell him that he no longer had a leg, but I think he knew it. You know, I don't think we or even I could ever forget the screams of pain, and more so the smell and the sight of blood. You could never get used to it. But you know, somebody asked me, did we ever lose any men? I said, unfortunately or unfortunately, I only lost one man and also one dust-off crew or one medevac crew. We were pretty lucky in a sense. You know, what we were doing in regards to saving the lives rather than taking the lives, we were my unit, and I was proud of all of my men because they were very professional, did the job excellently to save lives. As a matter of fact, what we were doing, according to the statistics, 92% of those coming into our AO or our clearing company survived their wounds. And as a matter of fact, our unit received the Army Commendation Unit citation because of what we did. The only thing that really bothered me was that I felt insulted because in all of us officers, key officers, I guess, had a bounty on our head. My bounty, and I was very disappointed, it was only $650. So in other words, if I get shot, whoever shot me only gets $650. I felt kind of insulted because as a captain, I was only making $621 a month. But I figured, maybe I'm lucky. It wasn't worth that much, so they won't shoot me. Sex and drugs. You could buy sex in the Ville or on the field. That's the only problem, is that these soldiers never learned. They didn't know to use, they did not use a condom. And as a result, they got the clap with the gonorrhea. So they came into our clearing station. So what we would do, we would tell them, drop your pants and bend over. And we give them 2 silver bullets in the okole. What is that? 2 penicillin shots. Well, it's fine and dandy, but they felt that they were invincible. So every time they got, the clap, they'd come in and get two more silver bullets. The only problem, they didn't realize they may become, their body may become immune to penicillin. Drugs were easily available. Marijuana came in a plastic container already rolled, and you could buy it in the Ville, and you can get Thailand heroin. I did not tolerate drugs, period. So I was fortunate. We only caught one man, one of my troops with marijuana, and we court-martialed him. I court-martialed him. Now, on the brighter side of the coin, our brigade executive officer loved to play poker. So he invited me to all of his poker games. Now, you got to remember that I kind of made a living playing poker in the university and in law school. By the way, if you guys went to UH, they had, I forgot, was that Bachman Hall? I don't know which, they had gambling where the student body center was. And so I made money, and I had made enough money to help me buy a new car and also my stereo equipment. So, that was kind of a plus. Booze was cheap. You could buy a bottle of Chivas for $3 and a bottle of Mateus wine for only $1.30. As a matter of fact, we had a makeshift officers club. I could go down there and for $5 buy the whole place a round of drinks. Another good thing is we had R&R and leave. R&R is rest and recuperation. I took that in Hong Kong, and I met my wife Linda and her parents. It was a platonic relationship back then. Okay, just good friends. And I remember if you wanted, if you want a female companionship, you had to pay for it. So what I remember when I was going over on a ferry to Hong Kong Island with Linda, and you got to remember now, if you're going to buy this female companionship, a lot of times the girls did not speak very good English. So anyway, we're going over on a ferry to Hong Kong Island, and one of the soldiers next to me said, as I was talking to Linda, "Hey, you all speaks pretty good English, man. You're lucky." But I didn't tell her that she was born and raised in America. But anyway, that was R&R. My leave, I went into Japan, and at that time, we're very fortunate because at that time it was 360 yen to a dollar. That was pretty cheap. Now it's like 100 to 1 if you're lucky. PTSD. Someone asked me, besides Agent Orange and getting diabetes and this loss of hearing, and did I ever suffer from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder? And I told him, yes, on one occasion, but only temporarily. And she said, why? Well, what had happened is that I was writing not only to my parents, but I was writing to some girls, different girls on the mainland and also in Hawaii. Well, on one occasion, I unfortunately or accidentally sent a letter that I wrote to Linda to this other girl. And the other girl wrote back and said, "Hey, I got this other letter." And I apologized to her very profusely. Well, later on, when we got married, Linda was in Hawaii, and she had said hello to this girl, and she snubbed her. And Linda says, "What's going on with this girl?" And I told her that was the other girl. And she said, "Well, Wes, how in the world can you do such a stupid thing?" And I thought, oh, battle fatigue. Now I was coming home. I left Vietnam in November 1970 and processed out of Fort Lewis in Washington. I called Linda to say if I could come and visit her on my way back to Hawaii. She said, "Sure, but whatever you do, do not come to my campus in your uniform." And I go, "What?" Here I was, 143 pounds, slim, flat top, I had 2 Bronze Stars on all these medals on my left. And, I was like God's gift to woman. Well, I didn't realize until I got to California that when she was attending the University of California at Berkeley, which was the hotbed of the Vietnam protests. Now, being on uniform, I was proud.
You better know what the heck.
But I remember when I was on mainland, I was on my uniform at that time, and someone asked me, well, after seeing my Americal Division patch, remember Me Lai? "Hey, are you one of those baby killers?" Another one of my friends who was also in uniform, somebody spat on him. When we got back to the States, there was no, "Hey, thank you for your service." And in 1975, when I was watching TV, I don't know, some of you were born by now, you were back then, you could remember this. They showed the last helicopter lifting off from the US Embassy in Saigon. And when I saw that, I didn't know whether to cry or be angry. And the only thing I could think of is, was it worth it? Well, as a postscript, I stayed in the Army Reserve. I got promoted to colonel. I became I think you heard from Matt, I became the Staff Judge Advocate for the Hawaii Headquarters 9th Corps, which is the Pacific Reserves. Became Deputy Commander for the Pacific Liaison Command, which is all of the Pacific commands and foreign countries. And also finally became the Staff Judge Advocate for the United States Army Japan. That was my last duty station. I retired in 1995 after 30 years of service. Now, as an epilogue, all I can say was I was proud to have served, but happier to be alive. And my only hope is that when my fellow Americans see a veteran, regardless of active duty, reserve, male, female, they would say to him or her, "Thank you for your service." Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Wes. Nice big round of applause. Thank you so much for sharing. And I'm glad we got a lot on recording, so we can pair that up with when your book releases. So yeah, thank you so much. Is there any questions for Wes on what he shared today? Um, okay. I think that is it. Wes, any other final things you'd like to share with the group?
No, thank you for the opportunity to share my experiences of my 30 years in uniform, actually 38 years in uniform. And I said before, I was proud to have served, but happy to still be alive. So thanks. And I want to thank my fellow veterans, because we have quite a few in our Rotary Club, for their service. Thanks.
I have a question for
Yeah, Richard.
Wes. Hey, Wes. Thanks for sharing. Really love that story. Glad I didn't miss this meeting. I have a question, kind of a self-reflecting type of question about you being so accomplished in many, many different avenues. What do you feel drives you to accomplish? This is a difficult question. All of these things that you've accomplished, not just in the military, but in your career, with community service projects. What drives you and continues to drive you all these years?
Richard, I've been asked that question many times, and my answer was, if you ever been to China, and if you ever been to a place called Xi'an, China, that's where the terracotta figures are. There is a pagoda called the Wild Goose Pagoda in Xi'an. And in the pagoda, surrounding the walls, would be all these different sayings, Buddhist sayings. And a lot of them were translated into English. And I still remember one that I really follow, and it's, your value is not in how long you live, but in how much you contribute. And I try to follow that in my life, regardless of what field I am contributing to, be it law, the military, my community service. And maybe that's what drives me. And maybe my Catholic background, give, better than take.
Thanks, Wes.
Thank you, Wes, and thank you, Richard, for that question. And yes, I see Wes, what he's talking about at the, especially towards the end, regards to like any veteran or anyone who's in the service saying thank you. I saw it at the pantry. We had some Air Force members there, and he was chatting up with those gentlemen over there, and it was so fun to see Wes sharing his stories and kind of that banter with those in the service. So absolutely. So and thank you again so much, Wes, for the insight, and I certainly learned a lot. All right. I do want to make a quick shout out to Bub Woe, who's here, who's also currently